I didn't expect Emily to show up at my door again, not after the way she left, not after 2 years of silence that had grown so thick it felt permanent, like dust on a forgotten photograph. But there she was, standing in the rain, and the first thing she said to me wasn't hello. It wasn't my name. It was, I have nowhere else to go. I remember the exact way her voice broke when she said it, like something inside her had finally given up holding itself together. For a moment, I honestly thought I was imagining her, because 2 years ago, she had walked out of this same house with a suitcase and a kind of determination that told me she would never come back. And I had believed her. Now she stood on my porch again, soaked through, her hair clinging to her face, clutching that little brown handbag she always carried when she was nervous. The rain was pounding against the glass behind her, and I just stood there. I wish I could tell you I rushed to her, that I pulled her into my arms. But I didn't. I couldn't, because the last time I saw her, she was leaving me. And I had learned the hard way that loving someone doesn't stop them from walking away. James, she whispered again. Hearing my name like that did something strange to my chest. Not anger, not even resentment, just something fragile I thought had died a long time ago. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I shouldn't have come, she said quietly, already turning back toward the rain. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Her hands were shaking, not just nervous shaking. The kind that comes when someone has run out of strength to pretend they're okay. I watched her take one step off the porch, and suddenly a thought hit me so hard it almost scared me. What if this really was the last time I'd ever see her again? So before I could talk myself out of it, I said the one word I never thought I'd say to her again. Wait. And when she turned back toward me, tears running down her face, I realized something that completely caught me off guard. A part of me had never stopped hoping she would come home. Emily stopped when I said it. Just one word. Wait. But the way she froze on the porch made it feel heavier than that, like the entire night was holding its breath. For a second, she didn't turn around. Her shoulders just trembled under the rain. I suddenly realized something uncomfortable. She didn't expect kindness from me anymore. Slowly, she looked back. The porch light caught her face, and that's when I saw how much the last 2 years had changed her. The Emily I remembered used to carry herself like she had somewhere important to be, like the world was waiting for her. This Emily looked tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, the kind life leaves behind. You're soaked, I said, because it was the only thing my brain could manage. She gave a small, broken laugh. Yeah, that seems to be a theme lately. There was something different about the way she said it. Less sharp than before, less defensive, and somehow that made this harder. I stepped aside from the doorway. Come inside before you catch pneumonia. For a moment she didn't move, like she wasn't sure if this was real, or if I might change my mind. I won't stay long, she said quickly. I didn't know where else. You already said that, I interrupted gently. Her lips pressed together, embarrassed. God, I remembered that expression. Emily always did that when she thought she'd said too much. The memories hit me in quiet waves. Sunday mornings, burnt pancakes, the way she used to hum when she thought no one was listening. I pushed the thoughts aside, because nostalgia is dangerous when the person who broke your heart is standing 3 feet away. She stepped inside slowly like she was entering someone else's house. Water dripped from her coat onto the floor. I'm sorry, she murmured automatically. You always hated when the floor got wet. That caught me off guard, because she remembered, and for a strange second, it felt like we had skipped backward in time instead of forward. I walked to the hall closet and grabbed an old blanket, the same one she used to steal during movie nights. When I draped it over her shoulders, she sucked in a shaky breath. And then something happened I wasn't prepared for. Emily started crying. Not the quiet kind. The kind someone cries when they've been holding it in for months, maybe longer. I stood there awkwardly, unsure what to do, because the truth was, I had imagined this moment before, her coming back. But in every version I imagined, she looked strong, defiant, not broken. Finally, she whispered something so softly I almost didn't hear it. I didn't think you'd open the door. And that sentence made me realize something that unsettled me more than anything else that night. Emily hadn't come here expecting forgiveness. She came here expecting rejection. I didn't know what to do with her tears. That might sound strange considering she used to cry in front of me all the time back when we were married. But those were different tears. Frustration. Arguments. The kind that came with raised voices and slammed doors. These were quieter, heavier. Emily sat on the couch, clutching the blanket around her shoulders while I stood near the kitchen doorway, pretending to focus on boiling water for tea. It gave me something to do with my hands, because the truth was, seeing her like this made something inside me ache in a way I wasn't prepared for. She used to hate crying in front of anyone, especially me. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. Her voice was small, almost embarrassed. I turned slightly. "For what?" She let out a shaky breath. "For showing up like this." That answer lingered in the room longer than I expected. Not for leaving. Not for the things she said 2 years ago, when anger had turned our living room into a battlefield. Just for showing up. I handed her the tea. Our fingers brushed for half a second, and that tiny moment felt strangely electric. Not romantic. Not exactly. Just familiar. Too familiar. She noticed it too. I could tell by the way her hand pulled back quickly. "Thank you," she whispered. I sat in the armchair across from her, keeping the distance between us that life had carefully built over the last 2 years. For a while, neither of us spoke. The rain tapped steadily against the windows like it was filling the silence for us. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. "My car ran out of gas 3 streets away." I blinked. "That's how you got here?" She nodded. "I drove for hours before that." "From where?" Emily stared into the steam rising from her cup. "Everywhere." The way she said it made my chest tighten. There were 100 questions I could have asked. Where had she been living? Why now? What happened after she left? But something stopped me, because the truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear those answers, and maybe she wasn't ready to say them. So instead I asked the simplest question, "You eaten today?" She hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen. Behind me, I heard her whisper something that made my steps slow. "I didn't think you'd still be this kind." And for the first time that night, a difficult thought crossed my mind. What if kindness was exactly why she left me in the first place? Her words stayed in my head longer than I expected. "I didn't think you'd still be this kind." I stood at the stove pretending to focus on heating soup. But the truth was, I wasn't thinking about the food at all. I was thinking about the last fight we ever had. Emily had looked at me with tears in her eyes and said something that confused me for months after she left. "You're too calm about everything, James." At the time, I thought she meant it as an insult. Maybe she did. Now I wasn't so sure. Behind me, I could feel her watching the room like someone visiting an old memory. When I turned, she was looking at the bookshelf. "The picture is still there," she said softly. I followed her gaze. The old photo from our trip to Oregon. Emily standing by the ocean, hair blowing everywhere, laughing at something I had said. I had forgotten that picture was even still up. "You never took it down," she murmured. I shrugged lightly. Didn't see a reason to. That wasn't entirely true. But I didn't feel like explaining the real reason. That every time I thought about removing it, something stopped me. She didn't press the subject. Instead, she stood slowly and walked toward the kitchen. The blanket slipped slightly from her shoulders. For a moment, I noticed something small but strange. Emily used to move quickly, restlessly, like her thoughts were always racing ahead. Tonight, her movements were slower, careful, almost like someone who had learned the hard way that rushing leads to mistakes. She stopped beside the counter. "Do you still make that terrible tomato soup?" she asked quietly. I glanced at her. "It's canned." She smiled faintly. "Still terrible." That tiny smile hit me harder than it should have, because it was the first time since she arrived that she looked even slightly like the woman I used to know. For a moment, neither of us spoke, just stood there in the warm kitchen while the rain softened outside. Then Emily asked something so unexpected it made my chest tighten again. "James, did you ever hate me after I left?" The question hung between us like a fragile glass about to fall, and the honest answer was something I had never told anyone. I didn't hate her, not even once, but what I felt instead might have been worse. Her question stayed in the air between us. "Did you ever hate me after I left?" For a moment, I just stared at the soup simmering quietly on the stove, trying to decide how honest I wanted to be, because the truth wasn't simple, and honesty has a way of reopening wounds you thought had already healed. Emily waited beside the counter, twisting the edge of the blanket between her fingers, the same nervous way she used to do during arguments. I hadn't seen that habit in years. Finally, I said the only answer that felt real. "No." She looked up quickly, surprised. "No?" she repeated. I shook my head slowly. "I tried," I admitted. "Trust me, I really tried." A small crease formed between her eyebrows. "But hate requires energy," I continued quietly. "And after you left, I didn't have much of that." The words sounded calm when I said them, but inside my chest something shifted, because saying it out loud brought back memories I had carefully buried. The quiet house, the empty side of the bed, the way mornings suddenly felt longer without her humming in the kitchen. Emily looked down again. I thought you would, she whispered. Hate you? She nodded. That would have made things easier. I leaned against the counter. For who? For me, she said softly. That answer hit harder than I expected. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she surprised me again. I was angry when I left, she admitted. I know. But the anger didn't last very long. I frowned slightly. What replaced it? Emily let out a slow breath. Reality. There was something heavy behind that word, something she wasn't explaining. I noticed the faint shadows under her eyes, the tired posture she couldn't quite hide. Life hadn't been kind to her. That much was obvious. You don't have to explain anything tonight, I told her. Her eyes met mine then. Not defensive, not guarded, just vulnerable. That's the problem, she said quietly. What problem? Emily hesitated before answering. The last time we talked honestly, our marriage ended. Her voice trembled slightly. And now I'm scared that if I tell you the truth about these last 2 years. She stopped. I waited, but when she finally finished the sentence, her words caught me completely off guard. You might regret letting me through that door. Her words stayed with me long after the soup had cooled. You might regret letting me through that door. I studied her face, trying to understand what kind of life could make Emily say something like that. 2 years ago, she left with confidence, with fire in her voice and certainty in every step. Now she looked like someone who had spent too long carrying things alone. I don't regret it, I said quietly. She looked up at me, surprised again. You don't even know what happened yet. Maybe, I replied, but I know you. For a moment, her expression softened in a way that made something in my chest tighten, because it reminded me of the woman I used to wake up next to every morning, the one who used to steal the blankets and complain about my terrible coffee. Emily wrapped the blanket closer around herself. You always say things like that, she murmured. Like what? Like you understand me better than I understand myself. I shrugged lightly. Sometimes I did. She gave a faint smile at that, not a big one, but enough to warm the room a little. Then the silence returned, but this time it felt different, less fragile, almost familiar. Emily slowly took a sip of the tea I had made her. I lost my job last year, she said suddenly. The confession came out quietly, like she had been holding it back for hours. I nodded, letting her continue. At first I thought it was temporary, she said. Just a bad month. Her fingers tightened around the cup. But then things kept getting worse. She didn't go into details. She didn't need to. The exhaustion in her voice filled in the blanks. What about the guy you left with? I asked carefully. It was the first time I had mentioned him out loud. Her reaction was immediate. A small, bitter laugh escaped her. That didn't last. How long? Emily thought for a second. Long enough to realize I had made a terrible mistake. Something about the way she said it didn't feel dramatic, just honest. For a while, neither of us spoke again. Then she looked around the house slowly. The place looks the same, she said. Mostly. Her eyes settled on me. But you don't. I frowned slightly. What's different? She studied me for a moment before answering. You look lonelier. The strange part was, she wasn't wrong. You look lonelier. I let out a quiet breath when she said it. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Friends who visited said things like, "You seem fine, James." Coworkers joked that I had the perfect quiet life. But Emily had always been able to read the spaces between my words. Even now, maybe I am, I admitted. Her eyes softened immediately. Like hearing that answer hurt her more than she expected. I didn't think you'd stay alone, she said carefully. That sentence made me glance at her. Why not? Emily looked down at her hands. Because you were always the kind of man people want to build a life with. It sounded sincere, but there was guilt tangled inside it. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Funny, I said quietly. The one person I wanted that life with didn't feel the same way. The words weren't meant to be cruel, but they still landed hard. Emily flinched just enough for me to notice. I deserved that, she whispered. The room went quiet again. Outside, the rain had softened to a gentle tapping against the windows. Finally, she asked something that caught me off guard. Did you ever date anyone? I hesitated. Once. Her head lifted quickly. Once. I nodded. About a year after you left. Emily waited, almost holding her breath. What happened? I thought about that night for a second. The awkward dinner. The forced conversation. The strange feeling in my chest the entire time. She was nice, I said. Emily's shoulders tensed slightly. But it felt like I was cheating. Her eyes widened. James and we were already separated. I know, I said calmly. But my brain didn't seem to understand that yet. Something complicated moved across her face then. Relief, regret, maybe even something warmer. You were always loyal, she said quietly. I gave a small shrug. Habit, I guess. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Emily looked toward the window where the rain was slowly fading. When I was driving here tonight, she said softly, I kept thinking about turning around. Why didn't you? Her voice trembled slightly when she answered. Because I was afraid that if I didn't try this, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I came home. That word again. Home. And hearing her say it stirred something in me that felt both hopeful and dangerous. Because the truth was, if Emily walked away again this time, I wasn't sure my heart could survive it twice. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because Emily was on the couch downstairs, but because hearing her say the word home had stirred something in me I had spent 2 years trying to quiet. Hope. And hope is dangerous when you've already watched it break once. Morning came slowly. Sunlight slipped through the kitchen window, soft and quiet, like it was trying not to interrupt anything fragile. When I walked into the living room, Emily was already awake. She was standing near the bookshelf, staring at the old photo from the Oregon trip again, the one where she was laughing into the wind. For a moment she didn't notice me, and I saw something on her face that caught me off guard. Regret. Deep, heavy regret. I used to think that trip was the beginning of our problems, she said suddenly. I leaned against the doorway. Why? She glanced at me. Because that's when things started feeling complicated. I remembered that trip differently. It was the last time we had looked truly happy. Funny, I said quietly. That was one of my favorite memories. Emily swallowed hard. That's the problem. What is? She turned toward me fully now, her eyes glistening. I spent years convincing myself that leaving you was the brave choice. The room felt smaller suddenly, but... Her voice cracked slightly. But the longer I stayed away, the more I realized something that terrified me. I felt my chest tighten. What? Emily stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. That I didn't leave because our marriage was broken. Her fingers trembled slightly as she spoke. I left because I was scared of how much you mattered to me. The confession landed between us like a dropped glass, sharp, unexpected. For a moment I didn't know what to say. Because that wasn't the explanation. I had spent 2 years preparing myself to hear. Emily wiped quickly at her eyes. I thought if I walked away first, I wouldn't have to experience the day you stopped loving me. Silence filled the room. Then I asked the one question that suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Emily. She looked up. If that's true, why come back now? Her answer came out so quietly it almost sounded like a secret. Because last night I realized something while sitting in my car outside your street. I waited, and when she finished the sentence, everything inside me shifted. I realized losing you once was enough. Her words stayed in the room long after she said them. Losing you once was enough. For a moment I didn't trust myself to speak, because hearing that after 2 years of silence felt almost unreal, like someone had quietly rewritten a chapter of my life when I wasn't looking. Emily stood a few feet away from me, twisting the blanket nervously between her fingers again. I remembered that habit. She only did it when she was afraid of the answer she might hear. You know something strange? I said finally. Her eyes lifted carefully. What? For a long time I thought you left because you stopped loving me. She shook her head immediately. No. The answer came too fast to be rehearsed, too honest. I never stopped loving you, she said softly. The confession settled deep in my chest. Not like fireworks, more like warmth spreading slowly through a room that had been cold for years. But love wasn't the problem, she continued quietly. What was? Fear. Her voice grew steadier now, like she had decided there was no reason to hide anymore. I grew up watching my parents fall apart, she explained. They loved each other once, and then they destroyed each other. I listened without interrupting. So when our marriage started getting hard, I panicked. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I convinced myself leaving early would hurt less than staying, and watching everything collapse. The strange thing was, I understood that, maybe more than she realized. Emily, I said gently. She looked up again. You didn't destroy everything. Her eyebrows pulled together slightly. I didn't? No. I stepped a little closer. You damaged it, I admitted honestly. But destroyed things can't be repaired. Her breathing slowed as she absorbed that. And this? She asked quietly, gesturing between us. What is it now? I thought about the last 2 years. The loneliness, the silence, the strange feeling in my chest when she knocked on my door last night. Then I answered the only way that felt true. I think this is 2 people who finally understand what they almost lost. Tears filled her eyes again. Not the same broken tears from last night. These were different. Lighter, hopeful. But then she said something that made my heart skip. There's one more thing I need to tell you. I felt my stomach tighten. What is it? Emily hesitated for the first time since she started confessing. And when she finally spoke, her words changed everything. I didn't come back here just because I had nowhere else to go. I didn't come back here just because I had nowhere else to go. The words settled heavily between us. For a moment I just watched her, waiting. Because something in her voice told me there was more behind that sentence. Emily took a slow breath like she was steadying herself. I could have gone to my sister's, she admitted quietly. Or found a cheap motel somewhere. I crossed my arms slightly. But you didn't. She shook her head. No. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time since she arrived, there was no hesitation in them. I came here because I needed to know something. My chest tightened. What? Emily stepped closer, close enough that I could see the tiny scar near her eyebrow. She got years ago when we tried fixing the kitchen cabinet together. I needed to know if the man I loved still existed, she said softly. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, that man had changed. 2 years of quiet will do that to a person. But Emily kept speaking. I spent so long convincing myself that leaving was the right choice. She continued. That coming back felt impossible. Her voice trembled slightly. But last night, sitting in my car outside this house, I realized something. I waited. She swallowed. If I drove away again without knocking, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if we could have fixed what we broke. Silence filled the room. Then I asked the one question that mattered most. And now that you know I still exist? Emily smiled through tears. Now I want to try again. 3 simple words followed. Quiet, honest. Not perfectly, she added. Not like before. Her hand slowly reached for mine, but better. For a moment I just looked at her hand resting over mine. 2 years ago I watched her walk out that door. I thought that chapter of my life had ended forever, but sometimes life does something strange. It brings people back to the exact place where everything fell apart, and asks them to build something stronger. So I squeezed her hand gently, and for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel empty anymore.